Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavita. I'll be your part-time host. Then I'll be taken over by the last half will be Mark Lee. And we have a very important topic we're going to discuss. The national debt just hit $38 trillion. And the media ignores it. Congress ignores it. The White House ignores it. And everybody ignores it like, hey, it's nothing. But it is something, and it's something big. And to give you an idea, if you taxed all the Fortune 500 and you took all their money, every single dime, you'd have 8 trillion. You still owe another 30 trillion. So the people in the United States have a serious problem. And with that, we're looking for solutions. And with that, we have the former Chief Comptroller General of the United States, the Honorable David M. Walker, who's going to show us the way, the truth, and the light, how to get out of this $38 trillion problem. Every time I look at the math, David, it doesn't add up. You can take all the billionaires, 500 of them, and take all their money away, make them completely broke. And that still only amounts to 8 trillion. Where are we getting the other 30 trillion from? Realize this is runaway debt. It's not debt. This is runaway debt that ultimately it's like a time bomb. And the only question is if it's going to explode. The question is, when is this going to explode? And then everybody's going to take the shrapnel. So we need a solution. We need it now. We need it quick. We need David M. Walker. David, take it away.
All right, Nick. Well, first, let me congratulate you. I know you've moved from the United States to Spain, and I just recently read an article within the last week saying that Spain is now the #1 desirable location for Americans to be able to relocate to for a number of different reasons. So congratulations on being ahead of the curve there. Let me give some contextual sophistication to what the numbers are now. You properly point out that we've now passed $38 trillion in total debt. That debt includes debt held by the public and debt held by the so-called trust funds. I put the words trust funds in quotes because technically they're not real trust funds. They're not separate and distinct legal entities. They're not managed for the exclusive purpose of the beneficiaries. They don't have fiduciary responsibility and liability, and all they have in them is U.S. government debt. But fortunately, that debt is guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, guaranteed as the principal and interest, and I would argue guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. But the 38 trillion is a lowball number. You know, just like an iceberg, there's a lot more ice under the water than there is above the water. The 38 trillion is the ice you see above the water. Below the water, you have huge unfunded civilian and military pensions, retiree health care, a range of other traditional liabilities. You also have a huge unfunded Social Security, Medicare obligations. And so while the financial statements for the year ended September 30, 2025 haven't come out yet, the bottom line is it's well over $125 trillion. And so it's not 38, it's 125 plus. But to add insult to injury, you know, we're running $2 trillion deficits a year. We have to refinance another 6 or 7 trillion on top of that. So basically we have to refinance $7 to $8 trillion a year, not just the new deficits. In addition to that, 74% of the budget is now on autopilot. We've written a blank check, so-called mandatory spending. Interest is the second largest line item in the budget, exceeded, only by Social Security, but on the path that it's on now, it eventually will exceed Social Security. And yet the government is in a shutdown, the 21st time since 1980. The only express and enumerated responsibility the Congress has to do every year is to pass all the appropriations bills. They failed to do it again. It's now been 25, 26 days that we're under a shutdown. And the end is not clearly in sight. And so, we need to do a number of things. And I've advocated, well, first, let's talk about the shutdown and what needs to be done to avoid this. We need to have automatic continuing resolutions for whatever part of the appropriations process the Congress has not completed. That would mean that you have authorization to spend at the prior year's level until the Congress ends up passing a new appropriation. That's number one. Number two, Congress should have to work 7 days a week until they end up passing all the appropriations bills. Number three, they should not get paid until they pass all the appropriations bills. And number four, there should be no retroactive pay. In fact, the way that it is right now, it's exactly the opposite. They don't have to work. They still get paid on time. Whereas you've got, other federal workers that aren't getting paid, in some cases can't work, in other cases must work. The system is totally messed up. That's unacceptable, unsustainable. The other two things we have to do is the only thing that will bind current and future Congresses to make tough choices on spending and revenues on a recurring basis to be able to restore fiscal sanity and sustainability is a constitutional amendment. And since Congress won't do it, the states have to do it through Article 5. We can come back to that. And Congress should have called that convention years ago. And thirdly, what we have to do is we need to learn the lessons from Simpson-Bowles, which was not a statutory commission in 2010. We need to create a new one where everything's on the table. Not all things are equal, but everything's on the table. That engages the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicits input, and sets the table for 2 up or down votes by Congress. One, to restore the solvency and sustainability of Social Security standing alone. And as you know, I used to be a trustee of Social Security and Medicare before I was Comptroller General. And secondly, to reduce, yes, I said reduce debt to GDP to a reasonable and sustainable level over the next 10 to 15 years with automatic targets, triggers, and of enforcement mechanisms. That's what we need. We need it sooner rather than later, because if we don't get that, it's only a matter of time before we have a debt crisis. And we can talk about what a debt crisis might look like, but it's something that we never want to see in the United States, nor should we want to see it around the globe, because the ultimate impact would likely be a global depression.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's not a question of if right now, it's a question of when. And it's hard to make the timing, but what we do have that we can time is our panel, who's going to be coming in from all over the world. We're going to bring in from the New York City area, Peter Bennett, whose show Wall Street Hackers is well received. From Canada, of course, we have Sasha Starr, who already has a comment. And then from Bangladesh, we have Dr. Sharif. And from the United States, we have Jatovi. So we're going to start with you, Sasha, because you got your hand up. So what sort of comments do you have about the U.S.'s big debt crisis? Should we all move to Canada?
Yeah, that's one of the healthy ideas lately, and a lot of people do that, exactly. But David, I would like to understand something, and maybe you can explain it. So when Trump came to power, the debt was $36 trillion. Then he appointed Elon Musk. He fired a lot of people. So supposedly the debt should have got somewhat lower. But in a few months, in about 8-9 months, let's see, it's now $2 trillion over to the time or the day when Trump came to power. How come?
Well, first, when Trump took office, the Congressional Budget Office projected that the deficit for the year ended September 30, 2025 would be about $2 trillion. It turned out it was $1.8 trillion. So before he came in, it was projected that it was going to be $2 trillion for the year. The primary difference between the $2 trillion and the 1.8 is the additional tariff revenues. But those tariff revenues are questionable because there's now a case before the Supreme Court that's challenging the ability of the president to unilaterally impose tariffs, which is done on a number of countries, including Canada. And we'll have to see how the Supreme Court resolves that. My personal view is there's a fundamental difference between tariffs that have been agreed to between parties and ones that have been unilaterally imposed, especially if they're not actually reciprocity, because in many cases they're not reciprocity. And at the same time, if the if the Supreme Court strikes down those unilateral tariffs that don't represent reciprocity, then I don't think they would require us to refund the money. But you got to keep in mind we've gotten additional money from tariffs, but it's a small fraction of what our deficit is, and so that's why ultimately what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to reform our social insurance programs to make them solvent, sustainable, secure, but reduce projected spending. We're going to have to reprioritize and reduce discretionary spending, which is only about 26% of the budget now. We're going to have to, that will help to also reduce interest rates by providing confidence that we can actually do some things. We're going to have to engage in comprehensive tax reform that generates more revenues as a percentage of the economy. More people are going to have to pay something, and the wealthy are going to have to pay more while remaining competitive on the corporate side, because corporations don't have duty of loyalties to the country. They have duties of loyalty to their shareholders. So those are some of the things. But the bottom line is, Sasha, there was a huge deficit that was projected before he was president. So this is something that has existed for a while.
We'll get Peter Bennett, then Jacoby.
Oh, hi, everybody. So a bunch of points about what was said. And I had two major questions, I thought, for David. But one, it's really interesting. The media never talks about 125 trillion, almost never. My show, we talk about it all the time. This show, we talk about it all the time. It's much closer to the reality than 38 trillion. 125 trillion, by the way, and that's just what the U.S. owes, is more money than the entire U.S. stock market, the entire U.S. bond market, all privately held real estate in the United States, and all commercial real estate in the United States. So basically, it's everything. And so, and also Nick's point about the S&P 500 being the current debt is also an amazing statistic. I mean, it's just unfathomable amounts of money. The next point is, this is a worldwide crisis, and it really worried me that the word depression was used, because even if the United States can solve their problems, and I have two questions for David about how that might happen, the rest of the world, if I've looked at it, looks to me to be exactly the same, if not worse shape, because at least the U.S. has more wealth to try to solve the problem. But I've looked at countries in South America, in Europe, in Asia, country after country, unfunded retirement plans, offering almost free health care, at least one offering free health care, but almost free health care to aging demographics. And my guess is these countries haven't put away anything for these aging demographics, because they don't even have trust funds for the future. So does that mean, and that isn't even the question, but that's a third question David could also address, does that mean potential worldwide depression? So now I get into these questions. And one last footnote about the ability for tariffs. One, I hope the Supreme Court allows it if the country's in enough trouble without it. But two, it has been discussed, and I know David knows this, that there are other ways President Trump could apply the tariffs if the Supreme Court rules against it. So there's sector by sector ways. He won't be powerless to do tariffs. We need tariffs. There are some people say, oh, he's not a free trader. It's the opposite. The rest of the world has not been doing free trade with us. It's time we enforced equal trade so that hopefully we get free trade. So here comes the questions. One, even if the Republicans, who at least the Congress, if not the White House, seems very aware of the deficits. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, said he used words which I've used in a report I wrote. He said, the kicking the can down the road of the debt is running out. So these are smart people. They're very smart in general, the Congress people. So if they're aware of it, the first question is there a way that they can cut the programs without doing major damage, cutting the waste, which they're attempting to do, not paying illegal aliens for healthcare, just as an example. Is there a way to cut that back without major cuts to Medicare and Social Security? And the second question is, what will actually happen? I mean, and this is unknown. So I'm asking David a really hard question now, because nobody can predict this. If you did, you could, investment-wise, make a fortune on it, and the country would know what to do. But the questions are, if you look at the extra cash flow now, like if you print 125 trillion, more money than the U.S. stock market, the U.S. bond market, ... and the rest of the world is printing all this money because there's no way to tax it. As a footnote, you can take the money from the wealthy, but that'll slow an economy in general. That's been proven time after time. There are certain levels where taxation just drains an economy. So if you look at the flows this year, here's some interesting things. We are already printing a lot of money, but where did it go? 25 hospitals closed in 2024, and in 2025, there's 22 hospitals that have already closed in the United States alone. I don't know what's happening in other countries, probably not, because they're just printing money there. Then you look at, okay, so it's not going to the hospitals necessarily. They've been struggling for years. Then you have the XLV, which is the S&P 500 healthcare fund. So you think, okay, well, this is made up of pharmaceuticals. It's made up of medical device companies, health insurance companies, and diagnostic companies. So they should be making a lot of money because it's not going to the hospitals. It's going to, it's maybe flowing to there. Well, if you look at the XLV, it's actually down slightly for this year in 2025. It lost money if you invest in these companies. And if you look at it from 2022, 3 years, it's flat. So the money isn't going there. So where is the money going? And most importantly, what will happen when we have to print potentially $125 trillion? And what will happen to the world if the other countries don't prepare for this and they are printing money left and right? Where does it all go?
All right. Well, first, that's a lot, Peter. Okay, so
it is a lot.
Let me give you an overview. Many countries around the world have two serious problems. They have a demographic challenge and they have a debt challenge. And clearly the United States is in that category. There are a number of other countries that are in that category. Many people have said, well, we're the best looking horse in the glue factory. I would respectfully suggest you don't want to be in the glue factory, okay? Secondly, all countries are not equal. The United States is the largest economy based upon nominal GDP. The United States has the biggest capital markets of any country. The United States has 60% of global reserve currency. So a lot of these other countries that have serious problems can go down, but it's not going to have a global impact. It would have a serious adverse impact on that country and its citizens, but not necessarily the world. On the other hand, if people lose confidence in the ability of the United States to put its finances in order, which would likely result in a failed debt auction, that would end up having repercussions, not just domestically, but around the world. With regard to what do we need to do? We need to do the two things that I said. We need to recognize reality that we've already got too much debt as a percentage of the economy, that too much of the budget is we've written a blank check for is on autopilot. We need to reclaim. My personal view is there's only two things that shouldn't have a cap on annual spending. Number one, interest, because you can't have a cap. You've got to pay what the market is. And number two, Social Security, because we can reform Social Security, make the numbers work, and we don't have to have a cap on it. But everything else needs a cap. And the number one challenge is healthcare. Healthcare by far is the number one challenge. We've overpromised, we've oversubsidized. We're going to have to dramatically rationalize that system. We spend much more than any other country as a percentage of GDP. We get below average results. We're subsidizing people making well over 400% of poverty through the ACA, which is not logical or sustainable over time. And so, we need comprehensive reform there. My latest book, as you know, America in 2040, still a superpower question mark. It has the results of the 10,000 mile, 27 state tour that I did in 2012, which got 77 to 97% support for a whole range of tax and Social Security and healthcare and other reforms. A vast majority of those are still valid. The only difference is that the numbers are worse now. And so we're going to have to make bigger changes than what people agreed to back then, because Congress has failed to act. Last thing, I know for a fact that Speaker Johnson believes that we need a constitutional amendment. He doesn't believe that the Congress can achieve the 2/3 of the Senate and the House to be able to propose one. And therefore, we're going to have to do it through a state-led Article 5 convention. Congress should have called one as far back as 79, as recently as 2017. If they don't call one after that evidence has been clearly provided in the public forum, that'll be a real constitutional crisis. So we'll see what happens.
One or two.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Johnson also believes that you're not going to be able to make all these tough choices through the regular order. You are going to need a commission. Okay.
Absolutely.
We need a signal from the president that he would support such a commission, because if you don't have presidential support, you're not going anywhere fast. There is concern about, getting in the way of the midterms, which is November of 2026. My view is, look, even if you form a commission, even if we have a state-led convention for a constitutional amendment, these things aren't going to be effective until well after the midterm elections. But we don't have time to dilly-dally much longer.
I got two minor points.
Let me just finish, and then I'll let somebody else take over. But
I have two minor points and then a big point. One is
wait, no. Let me finish up first, just because then I'll let everybody else talk for a while. So a couple of points, David. One, I have to say though that when you say small countries may not be affected, listen, I've looked at the major countries in Europe. You know what they are.
I know they have a problem. There's no question about it.
They have, and Asia. You look at any country. You look at China. You look at Japan. And it's one of the worst. You look at South America, Brazil. So, but here's the thing, because the second question is the hardest, and I know probably nobody can answer this question. But the thing is, even if the United States could get their act together, and maybe most likely that we will. What happens when the world is printing money, and it will require money printing, but where's all that money going, and what's the effect on the system if they can't solve this problem?
Well, obviously, if you end up engaging in massive money printing, it means inflation. Okay.
Or stagflation, right?
Well, but still, that's inflation. Okay. I mean, you could
You're right.
You could have a stagnant economy and higher inflation. That's what stagflation is, right?
Exactly.
Stagflation is better than global depression, but it's not good. Okay.
No, it's not at all.
Here's the point. We're the lead dog. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever we do or don't do will end up having an impact, not just on us, but elsewhere in the world. Other people have the same problems we do, of differing magnitudes, but we can't control what they do. We can only control what we do. So it's time for us to get our act together, because we're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance, and nobody's going to bail out the United States.
Very, very good. You know what? I'm just going to add, on my show, we have a lot of viewers, a lot of times, like over 50,000 now. I'm going to start mentioning a stability commission. That's what we need. Because no politician can do it without a stability commission. And it's amazing that they've kicked the can down the road, even on creating the commission. And of course, David, you should be on that commission.
Last comment on that. There is something called the Fiscal Commission Act of 2025. And it has been introduced in the House of Representatives. It has about 40 co-sponsors, equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. That's something that I'm pushing. It does need some modifications to the bill. For example, it needs to clearly provide for significant citizen education and engagement before they make recommendations, not just after. Secondly, it needs to have two sets of recommendations, one for Social Security standing alone and the other for everything else based on debt to GDP. Thirdly, it needs more time to be able to do its work. It's proposing to do it way too quickly in order to be effective. Those are just three examples. It needs a few more, but there is hope. Okay. Now, the Senate's done nothing. Okay. But if we can get the House to do something, we can then send it to the Senate. And there's also HCR, House Concurrent Resolution 15, which calls for a constitutional convention under Article 5 to propose a fiscal responsibility amendment, limited to a fiscal responsibility amendment. Those are the two things that we really need to start pushing.
We do.
They can help us diffuse the debt bomb before it's too late.
I got a couple minor points. One is Mike Johnson's happy to keep the House shut down for, I don't know, into the near future, because then he doesn't have to deal with certain other things like the Epstein file vote. Two, illegal aliens, undocumented immigrants have never been able to get health care coverage. It's against the law for them to be able. Now, anybody can show up in an emergency room and get treated, but nobody who's not a citizen or here legitimately can get coverage.
Wait, Rick, let me just jump in, because one of my jobs is healthcare broker.
All right.
I will guarantee you, and my partner works in an area where there's a lot of minority people. I will guarantee you that massive amounts, I will guarantee you from first and second-hand experience, that massive amounts of people who are not supposed to be on the bills are on the bills, are on the rolls.
Because then they're cheating, they're doing illegal shit. And
yeah, you know how they're cheating? They sign up and the algorithm on the computer says you can have it.
Just to point out, in 1995, back in Reagan era times, is when that bill got signed, which is what Rick is talking about, where if you show up at the emergency room, you actually get taken care of, regardless of status or whatever you are. That is what Rick is talking about. Then Clinton actually installed it where the hospitals receive money back for treating the individuals that were uncovered, basically on the through Medicare, Medicaid.
But what Peter's saying is that there's not sufficient.
No undocumented worker is on the books for any federal funding. It is actually a talking point that attacks other individuals and creates a problem. Yes, there are states that do actual help out in that coverage as well, but that is not a federally funded thing. So no,
no. Actually,
hold on.
Okay.
First, it's illegal to hire illegals. Okay.
What's illegal, David?
Illegal to hire an illegal immigrant. It's illegal. All right.
No, I'm talking about healthcare.
Hold on, but it's not enforced. Okay.
Oh, I see.
My whole point is just because there's a law doesn't mean a damn thing. If the law is enforced, okay. And by the way, there are illegals receiving
that right there, Dave. I have to interject again. You're adding in false information into talking point.
No, it's not.
You're specifically saying that undocumented workers are receiving federal funding on healthcare insurance. Are you saying that?
You didn't listen to what I said, Jacoby. I said it's illegal to hire an illegal, and if you think that just because
Dave, I get that. What I'm saying to you, are you stating? I'm asking you a simple question.
Are you doing the filibuster? Whose show is this, Jacoby?
I'm asking you a question, and you're getting upset over this question. Let's have a conversation like we were just having.
Wait, can I handle this question?
I'm asking your question.
Dave, can I handle this question? Because I am a healthcare broker.
Yeah, let him talk about it.
I would know a lot about this because this is what I do day to day. So my partners and I have two partners, and we are some of the biggest producers of healthcare insurance in our state. So I have a lot of personal experience. I have hundreds and hundreds of clients. I will tell you, the way it's supposed to work is, if you're an illegal or you haven't been in the United States 5 years, you're not supposed to qualify. But the way the system works, at least in our state, is you apply, you go on a computer, and the computer spits out whether or not the person gets insurance. And we try to help everybody. Somebody could be, these are people. I try to help them. It's like they may be poor, they may be new immigrants, so I try to help everybody. And if they're going to give them health insurance, I'm not going to say no. So we sign people up, and many times somebody who should not be getting insurance winds up getting free insurance or very, very, very subsidized insurance. I'm talking about $10 a month or whatever.
And
They're not supposed to, but they do in my state.
so you're saying a state-funded thing is helping out with state individuals when I'm pointing out a federal fund.
No, he's
which
saying
is what
that-
we're talking
No,
about.
let me.
And then on top
he's
of that,
asking
and on
me,
top of
so
that,
I could explain it better than anybody in the world.
So
or
reported,
probably anybody in the world.
okay, Peter, on reported, there is roughly about a percentage, 1%,
Yeah.
that is receiving whatever. Can you say that that is a low percentage or is it a higher percentage?
Wait. Okay, so here's how it works, Jatovi. Because again, nobody. This is like, if you're talking to a doctor, you talk about medical stuff. I know a lot about this stuff because I've been doing it for over 20 years before I was on Wall Street for 17 years. So I know a lot about it. So here's the thing. What happens is, one, the federal government is paying part of the subsidies and the states are paying part of the subsidies. So it is coming out of the federal coffers, a good portion of it. And let me add that what happened is, if you want political background, this could be interesting to the audience. So what happened is there was COVID subsidies that are now being debated in Congress. And that
I understand that.
Wait, let
Peter,
me
I just
finish,
wanted to get to the
Toby.
point because
No,
we've
no,
got
but
only a
that
little
what
bit of time.
happened is
Peter,
it
come
allowed
on,
this.
he's the one who knows about it.
I know. I just wanted a percentage. I know the
I
background.
don't know the exact percentage, but
Nobody knows
I'll
that
answer it,
percentage.
Jatovi. I'll let you talk if you want other questions, but I can tell a lot of people about this stuff. So what happened is when the COVID subsidies were paid out, it was a massive increase. So I have clients making $400,000 a year with a family of four, and all of a sudden they're getting subsidies, sometimes substantial ones, and they could pay it out to almost anybody. So all of a sudden they became very generous with people who weren't necessarily to be on the roll. Percentage-wise, I don't know. I know my partner works in an area that's very minority. She has tons and tons of people. I have a lot of people who should not be legally on the rolls. The federal government's paying for some. My state's paying for some. It's okay with us because we're just helping people.
All right,
So that's why I asked about a percentage on there.
Hold
I don't know the
on,
percent.
hold the
It's
heck
very
on.
low.
Hold on.
Yeah.
This was just a minor point. This was just a minor point. I want to get to my major point, which is that we're in the middle of an AI bubble where an estimated 40% of the increase in world GDP comes from massive spending on AI. We're talking about a recession or maybe a depression because of tariffs and other stuff. Isn't somebody who knows talk about what's going to happen when the AI bubble pops? It seems
David, any thoughts around that, around the AI bubble popping?
A lot of people are going to lose a lot of money.
So it's got to increase our chances of getting hit with a major correction to the market, right?
Well, look, there are a lot of issues that nobody knows the exact thing it's around. I mean, for one thing, AI obviously has significant positive impacts with regard to productivity, but it also is going to have unknown impacts with regard to employment, positive and negative. Secondly, AI is going to require massive additional energy generation, and we've got a real problem with that. Okay, and so it's a challenge and an opportunity, but nobody really knows, Rick. That's one of the reasons that you diversify broadly, including in things that have tangible value.
I do have something to add to what you were asking, Rick. Exactly. A recent major study just said that 95% of companies, and these are companies spending billions on AI. I made this point on the last Wall Street Hackers. I said billions on AI, and 95% of the companies are saying they're receiving zero return on that money. And the other point I made on the last show is like every time I call AI, it drives me crazy. I just want to get a person because they don't even understand English, and these companies are paying for some things just get in my way of talking and getting service. And it will ultimately either blow up all of a sudden or it'll just hurt the market for years.
Well, so like tens of millions of people using AI or school kids using it to do their homework for them. You don't make any money off a school kid. There's no revenue stream off a school kid.
So this is actually my background dealing with technology and stuff. And the AI bubble itself,
wait.
we've been through this before with the .com bubble. And that's what's going on with the .com bubble is everybody, or with the AI bubble, is everybody is jumping in thinking it's a quick dollar and it's a quick fix. But honestly, and this is where I have to point to, and I'll reference a Fareed Zakaria show that I tried to show earlier before. What China is actually doing with the AI is actually using it as they're actually using it as an ecosystem. They're creating actual applications and so on and so forth around it to make it a necessity and a situating it into society as a piece and a need. What's going on in the US, we're actually just jumping in for dollars. And we're actually trying to lead instead of actually think about ways that it can be an ecosystem. So yes, Rick, when it bursts, because it's about to burst, there are going to be a ton of money, just like Dave said, that are going to lose. A ton of companies are going to lose a ton.
Right
of
now,
money.
Sasha's had his hand up for a
Yeah,
while.
I saw that.
Okay, if you're talking about U.S. liabilities, $38 trillion or $125 trillion on some other way to count that, it would be unfair if we will not count what are the resources, financial, natural, and others of United States. In fact, yes, it has a lot of resources. It's coal, oil, natural gas, potash, copper, and timber. Hey, but the largest one, there is no gold, if you noticed. Okay, the largest resource, the largest percentage of total federal assets at 33.9, almost $34 trillion. Guess it's a student loans. Okay, I don't want to comment on the validity of this fabulous resource. What I would like to mention this. By December 24, 2024, the gold reserves of United States were about $8 billion and China $5 billion.
Billion or trillion, Sasha?
I think it's trillion, yeah.
Trillion.
Must be trillions, yeah. So sorry, I'll look at it, but probably I would agree with
What's
you.
a billion here or a trillion there?
Yeah. Okay. Now,
So
if you look at the last count, which was September 25, the U.S. reserve is about the same, $8 trillion, and Chinese, if you remember, it was 5. Now it is $40 trillion, $40 trillion, and growing. So now we see that the China is moving into a new financial system where dollar, US dollar I'm talking about, will be simply eliminated because countries will prefer to deal, as the payments are concerned, a stable currency, preferably backed by gold, rather than US dollar, which is going nowhere but down. So whatever you will receive for some goods, say $100 million, in 2-3 months is going to be much less than that. It will be $97 billion or 95 or whatever. So China is now having a threefold play against US. Is a gold, enormous amount of gold, which will guarantee almost anything.
So, Sasha, what percentage of your portfolio do you have in gold?
I have only 5% in gold, and actually it got fabulous run, and I was selling and buying. And now I just hold 3%. Hopefully I will get more gold in.
So I looked it up. The total value of U.S. gold holdings is at the current price of gold is just over $1 trillion.
That's all? 1 trillion?
Yep.
That's a lot matter. Well, listen, we will see in 2 days, 3 days, on Thursdays, right? So it will be meeting between Emperor Xi and Trump. And I'm wondering what's happened if right at the beginning of the meeting, Xi will ask Trump, what is exactly you need, my friend? What's the Trump's answer?
Let me, if I can, give a couple of
David.
numbers about the financial statements. The largest asset on the U.S. government's financial statements is student loans.
Yeah.
True. Okay. Secondly, the United States owns a lot of things or has rights to a lot of things that are not shown as an asset on the balance sheet of the United States. Okay. For example, the federal government owns 20 to 25% of the land in the United States, but there's not any value associated with that land. Okay. The United States has the rights to timber, to mineral, and to oil and gas resources on federal lands, not all lands, on federal lands. But the only ones that are shown as an asset is that we actually have a signed lease. Okay. But as you know, we haven't been developing a lot of that, for a number of years. All right. But even if you take all those numbers, you throw up a number on the balance sheet, we're still way in the hole. Sasha, you properly point out that China and other countries are trying to move away from the dollar. They're trying to also move away from fiat currencies. And one of the trends that we see going on right now is a desire to try to create an alternative reserve currency that is backed by a combination of gold, potentially stable coin, and a basket of other currencies. And so, to me, that's a warning signal, that the United States is not taking seriously enough, and it's just another reason why we need to change course, and we need to start putting our own finances in order before there truly is a crisis of confidence that would not only affect us but the whole world.
Sharif?
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting discussion and thought-provoking. I just want to add 2 points. One is, if you see what you're discussing about US resource and everything, I think you should count the research and innovation patent. US has around $3 trillion valuations on patent. China has $2.33 trillion. This is extremely valuable. We always discuss about this gold and land and mining and everything. If you go for this global competition, scientific innovations is always very powerful, and USA have, because they have this Stanford, Harvard, MIT, and all of the things. This is very important. I think our discussion actually missing this point. Besides that, what I want to know from Honorable David Walker and rest of our guests, because recently Donald Trump, he is visiting Asia Pacific. Previously, he visited Saudi Arabia. Definitely, in terms of business deals and everything, Middle East is very important for USA, as well as ASEAN is very important for USA. So we are observing from trade agreement in Malaysia, President Trump secured several trade deals, including unrestricted US access to Malaysia critical minerals to exchange for 19% tariff on Malaysian goods. Additional agreement with Vietnam aims to limit tariffs 0 to 20%. These negotiations are part of border effect to strengthen economic ties in between Asia Pacific. Besides that, the diplomatic engagement, I'm observing Trump is now visiting Japan. This is extremely valuable and important tour for USA. I'm observing Trump receive a royal welcome and engaging in discussions with the Japanese leaderships. A key aspect of his visit, including negotiation for trade agreement with China, Xi Jinping, focusing on resolving trade tensions and addressing issues such as China's recent ban on rare earth mineral and etc. and etc. Besides that, even though Jatovi, I believe you do not shout on these discussions, you have a lot of agreement on these things, but I support Trump because of this ceasefire agreement. Even right now, this ceasefire agreement in Southeast Asia happening in front of Trump, in between this Cambodia and this Thailand. And for this particular issues, this Thailand and Cambodia issues, 48 people died and 300,000 people go for displacements. So I just want to know, what is your understanding about this Asia Pacific trade, diplomacy, and global peace? Because what I see, Anwar Ibrahim, I closely work with meet Anwar Ibrahim and his wife, and I see he's a fantastic leader for Malaysia. But I see that they are heavily supporting Donald Trump because of this ceasefires, because of this global peace. I believe the ASEAN countries, including Middle East, they will support more USA because of these peacekeeping missions and all of the things. Even though Donald Trump do not get the Nobel Prize, but there are a lot of discussions and other things.
Okay,
But,
let David answer the question.
yeah.
Well, first, Trump has clearly made trying to resolve conflicts and to bring peace to different parts of the world a top priority. He's clearly done that. You talk about the Thailand, Cambodia. There are a number of different conflicts around the world that he's helped to resolve. You're right. He didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize this year. He could win it next year. We'll see. Obviously, the big one that's outstanding is Ukraine, Russia. We've talked about that before. We can talk about it again, but let's move on to other things. Trump is not just interested in the tariff issue in his travels to Asia. He's also interested in security issues. And two of the things that we've become unduly dependent on from China are rare earth minerals and materials necessary for prescription drugs, not only with regard to the raw materials, but also processing capacity. All right. So one of the things that Trump is trying to do is to look for alternative sources for rare earth materials and materials necessary for prescription drugs. My personal view is I prefer free and fair trade. I prefer that we don't have tariff unless there's unfair trade practices. But there's two areas where I think we have to make sure that we are self-sufficient, either domestically or in partnership with our allies. And obviously, there are a number of countries in Asia that are allies, okay? And those two areas where we have to make sure that we are self-sufficient, either directly or in partnership with our allies, are national security and public health. And we're not today. We need to take steps to make sure that we are. But as you know, Doctor, there's a lot of pressure on these Southeast Asian countries in particular because China's in the neighborhood, right? We're a little way away. They're in the neighborhood, and historically, China has wanted to dominate its region. But now you see a situation where China is not just interested in dominating their region; they're interested in having a global impact, which is new. And so I think the result of this trip is going to be important. I think in particular, probably the most important meeting is going to be with President Xi, and we'll see what ends up happening because that's not just about trade and tariffs. I mean, it's also about the other issues that I mentioned. Yeah.
I'll just add one little footnote, which is a lot of times leaders meet after the framework is already established, and what I've heard is there is already an established framework for what they're going to negotiate. So a lot of times it's more show because everything's worked out by the people under them. So I believe that there is already an agreement. Hopefully it doesn't fall apart. And so hopefully we'll return to a more normal situation. We need a lot from them. They need a lot from us. So we will see.
Yeah. Hey, David, just really quickly, along that same line and everything along that space. I know that when Nick created this show, he was talking about it being 38 trillion going up. And we've also got this whole notion of a lot of people on November 1st are not going to have their SNAP benefit. So what kind of impact is that going to have on this debt situation that we're in? And how will that play out and everything like that? Because that's going to take place in about a week.
Well, first, federal workers are now missing their first full paycheck. Okay. SNAP benefits, which is food stamps, basically, nutrition assistance. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's 30 to 40 million people receive those benefits.
And 42 million.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Rick. Appreciate that very much. And that's obviously going to have a serious adverse impact on them because these are people that are hand to mouth for the most part. Okay. One would hope and expect that those two factors would cause them to reopen the government. But understand this, we're not going to save any money because everything's going to get paid retroactive. So in effect, what ends up happening is that, we lose productivity, we lose public services and public confidence, but it ends up costing us more money because you end up doing things on a retroactive basis. Plus, in some cases, you end up having to pay penalties because the government hasn't performed, from a contractual or other perspective, consistent with what its obligations are. And so, therefore, you can end up having penalties that end up having to be dealt with as well.
Yeah.
By the way, gold's taking a hit today, which I'm not happy about.
Oh yeah, you know what? It's going to take a hit because if I was China, I'd say, you know what? I'll pull back a little bit. The purchase, it's had such a run up. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, we'll cool off, let it cool down a little, and then we start buying again.
Yeah, well, India, as you know, its major holiday was just this last week.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And gold, and gold is something that a lot of it is bought for gifts during that holiday. If you
Oh,
will.
good point too. Very good.
I'm
Point.
wondering about something.
Wally.
Gold to go lower,
Mhm.
US dollar has to go higher. There is no other way. Gold cannot go lower if United States dollar will not go higher. Now, what will make, in your opinion, in next while, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, the United States dollar would go higher from the level where it is now? What exactly?
I think we have to end up getting the issues resolved with regard to the tariffs. I think that's a big issue that needs to get resolved. While the much bigger issue is the one that we're talking about here, what are we going to do to put our finances in order? That's a longer term issue. That's not something that's really going to affect things over the next several months. So I think the big uncertainty right now is the tariff situation and the relationship between U.S. and China. That's my view.
You kind of alluded to it earlier, David, and I did see your hand, Rick, so I'm going to come to you next and everything. But you kind of alluded to it earlier, and I know Sasha's not a big fan, and there are others on this show that are not a big fan, and I'm not that great of a fan either. But how much is crypto going to play into this notion? Because we know the current president is definitely involved in that in terms of trying to get this debt down, and how much is that going to play a factor in your mind, David?
Not a big one in my view. I think the one that people are focusing more attention on potentially as part of an alternative global reserve currency is the concept of stable value coins. I think that's something that there's, that there's much more attention on as potentially, being something that should be considered as an alternative going forward.
Appreciate it. Rick?
So liberals think Trump is an idiot. Conservatives think he's a great businessman. And I think both sides can agree that Trump has been lucky at various points in his life and in his presidency. So my question is, we got more than 3 more years of Trump. Can things improve under Trump, or do we need to wait for like a new Congress, a new president?
Well, you have to do by subject matter, right? I mean, for example, he's clearly done a very good job in obtaining border security, right? I mean, there's no question about that. The border was a mess before he was president. Now it's secure. I would argue that now's the time to do immigration reform, now that the border is secure, because which deals with some of the issues we talked about earlier. Secondly, he's clearly done a good job with regard to bringing peace to certain, parts of the world that had not been addressed previously. Thirdly, he at the same point in time, he's not taken any definitive steps to deal in a meaningful way with regard to the financial issue that we're talking about. Doge didn't do the right thing, didn't do it in the right way, didn't really save much money. And I think that's because Elon and his colleagues didn't realize that only Congress can cut spending. And then the only way that you can really save money without Congress's approval is hiring freezes and or reductions in force, which they turn to, and they've done a lot of that. But how you do it matters, because you can end up having counterproductive consequences if you don't do it the right way. So I think the jury's out. I think there's a tremendous amount of attention on the midterm elections as to what's going to happen in the midterms. Right now, Trump has got the House, the Senate, as well as the White House, obviously. The margins are very, very close. Every election is about control. My personal view is that the Republicans will retain the Senate. I think the House could go either way. But now you have all this redistricting efforts that are going on. And I can assure you those redistricting efforts, if they do go forward, they will benefit the Republicans more than the Democrats, because most of the heavily Democratic states have already been gerrymandered to a great extent.
And we only got a few more minutes to go and
Well,
everything.
I just wanted to. I mean, in my personal opinion, to answer, I guess it's all about perspective, really, because right now polling, just like Dave was talking about, for some, Trump is seen as good and Trump is seen as bad, and I think it's just a perspective thing with what you're asking, Rick. And it's going to be hard because, for example, I see a lot of stuff differently than Dave. I love him to death, but I still see things different than he does, and it's just from my perspective. Like the gerrymandering, that's been done both parties forever, and it's just a matter of, I mean, who do you feel hurt by most? And same thing with the healthcare situation. Same thing with, honestly, the one thing that I like. People say Doge did great things, but even Dave agrees that Doge didn't really do much of anything. So it's a perspective question, and that's tough to answer.
Okay, one thing about Dave's perspective is when I hear Dave talk, he talks about government as if it's not crazy. And then I go on Twitter where everybody's crazy, and I'm like, well, does that apply to the government too?
Yeah, that's social media and everything like that. Just really quickly, David, I do have to tease you about something, and I know your answer is going to be no and everything like that. But is there any danger? Because one of the things that we're hearing a lot of people talking about is this notion of the president going for a third term. So if you get your balanced budget amendment in this congressional caucus that would go on and have this notion of getting that passed and having a balanced budget, is there any possibility that he could twist it in order to get what he wants in that sense, if Steve Bannon is right, that he wants a third term?
He's not going to get a third term because the Constitution makes it clear he can't have one. You would have to have 3/4 of the states agree to amend the Constitution to give him a third term. Ain't no way in hell 3/4 of the states are going to give Donald Trump.
But I think liberals should support a third term for Donald Trump, because the chaos it would cause the Republicans might be helpful to us.
On a lighthearted note, staying there, we just got into a contentious debate on healthcare and federal and people breaking the law and federal undocumented workers being on federal thing. What's to stop Trump from breaking the law?
Well, it's more than a law. The Constitution is more than a law. But let me tell you how crazy things are. With all the things we're talking about, right? The number one thing that people are talking about right now in Washington is this addition to the White House to create a new ballroom, which is supposed to be 90,000 square feet, 70 feet high. That's almost double the size of the White House. So, I mean,
which is privately funded, though. Remember that.
It's not privately funded.
I understand that, but you don't want something that's bigger than the White House. I mean, I have no problem with adding a ballroom, but something that's almost double the size of the White House.
He's trying to make it into what Mar-a-Lago looks like. He's making a palace. Hence the reason why it goes back to Mark asking about the 2028 thing, because if you're putting all this money, if you're trying to make this thing happen and this grandiose idea, why am I going to leave now? You just got a plane.
It ain't going to happen. Don't lose any sleep over it. Y'all take care.
On that note, we're going to get on out of here. A great discussion. So we'll get out of here. We've got the media show coming up as well as the timeshare coming up as well.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.